I don't owe everything to everybody at all times. I also have a life outside of work. And if somebody's being too much or asking for too much, then I will politely and gently and respectfully tell them that. And they respect me for that.
Hello and welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. My name is Dave Aarons and I'm the founder and CEO of Unbundled Attorney. In this podcast, we interview our unbundled attorneys, as well as the leading experts in the industry, to identify the best practices for converting leads into paying clients and how to ethically and profitably deliver unbundled legal services and other affordable options in your practice. To learn more about how our exclusive unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com.
So we're going to dive right back in. That was a powerful exercise in scale to the next level. Some good questions, some great content. We're going to be roundtabling here later on this afternoon, right after lunch, so that you guys can kind of share some of the ideas and takeaways from that session, as well as what we're about to cover. But a lot of powerful information for sure. So with that, we are going to take a little bit of a different turn, right? This is building a high volume, multi-city enterprise that's, just beginning. I mean, it's amazing to be that, Brandon and Chase, these guys have only been at it for 3 years. So it's pretty amazing to consider what they'll be able to accomplish in 5 or 10. And that's their endeavor, cover the entire state.
Right. Thank you. Cool. Thanks.
That's one definition of success, right? But that's not going to be for everybody, right? And so in a very different light, we're going to switch context here and introduce here in just a moment Mr. Wilkinson. We've worked together for many, many years. He's worn many hats, worked with Thomas Howery back in the day when we first started working together as an associate attorney. So he's working with a partnership with a former unbundled attorney, and then came on as a solo, and then went and worked at a full service law firm, and then came back and has now been choosing to be solo with us in spite of opportunities in terms of volume being in the Dallas market. He's perfectly chosen to be a solo. For obvious reasons you guys will learn here in just a bit. So please welcome to the stage none other than Mr. Clay Wilkinson. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. Well, 8 years, I think, something like that.
It's about that, yeah.
I don't even know if I'm including Howard in that. But yeah, just take us through some of those initial versions of the Wilkinson story, and how you navigated those decisions over the course of time, and how we arrived at the choice of the way you're structuring your firm now.
Sure. So Thomas Howery, who Dave mentioned, is a good friend of mine from law school. He was a study group partner of mine, kind of 3 or 4 guys that we consistently were just study group friends from 2007 to 2011. He partnered with you, I think, pretty shortly after we graduated law school in 11 and were licensed in 11 as well. And I think was with you for maybe, I want to say, a year or 2. And then I kind of meandered through the wilderness of trying to figure out what I was going to do in my first couple of years of practice, and then maintained a friendship with him and kind of was working a couple different places. Nothing really seemed to be working out. Wasn't interested in anything I was doing. Wasn't doing family law at all. And he said, why don't you kind of quit what you're doing if you want to, and I'll just come and work with me and see what we can do. And so then kind of pretty shortly, let me set this down. Pretty shortly, I spent about a year or so working with him, doing family law, realized I really enjoyed it, realized I was kind of good at it for whatever reason. And then after about a year or 2, we joined and kind of merged what we called Howery and Wilkinson at the time. And that was it, fully supported by, I think at the time, there was a portion of time it was Family Legal Help, and then transitioned to Unbundled Attorney.
Yep.
And I think we did that for a couple of years. And then at some point, I guess many years ago, I had what I think was a very traditional trajectory. In other words, start small, learn, grow, build, move on to the next big, best thing. And so with that mindset, I then decided to join a very large downtown Dallas law firm that had a family law section. They did everything. It was maybe 100, 200 lawyers, but they had a 10-lawyer family law section. And you and I have talked many times about the kind of income, growth that happened from year 1 through now. But at the time, I was making X kind of just on my own, finding my way first couple of years. When I then joined Thomas and we did that thing for a couple of years, I doubled kind of what I was making before. And then when the law firm presented that opportunity, they were doubling what I was making with Thomas. Mm-hmm. And I thought, why not? This is prestige. This is the next big step for me. I'll join this big kind of white shoe law firm. I'll do family law still, but I'll make twice what I was making before. This will be fantastic. And so I spent a year at that law firm. This was probably 2016 to 2017. Mm-hmm. And lived a very traditional law firm life. I would get there at 8 or 9 in the morning. I'd leave at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, 5 to 7 days a week. Wouldn't see my family at all. Have no personal time to really do much of anything. There were some dysfunctional aspects to the law firm that aren't really worth getting into, and that's probably true, a number of different places. But ultimately felt very hemmed into the work I was doing, what I was making, and the quality of life that I was living. And right now I have a 13-year-old son and a 9-year-old son. At the time, do the math, they were, 2 and 5 or 6, I guess. And I really felt like I was missing out on a lot of what was just going on with them day to day. In addition to that, like we've talked about many times before, on the outside looking in, the large law firm model looked very attractive from a personal and professional standpoint. But when you get there and you realize that when they're charging $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 initial retainers, and when an uncontested divorce can be a $5,000 to $10,000 exercise, because they're having to pay for not just the regular associate attorney who's doing the work, but the senior associate or the senior attorney who's reviewing the junior attorney's work, the paralegal and legal assistant who's supporting that, then it becomes this massive billing exercise where, what should be a couple $1,000s becomes easily $5,000, $10,000 to $15,000. And just with the combination of all of that, I realized that was the last place I wanted to be. It's not where I wanted to spend even another year, much less the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so I made kind of a very risky, what felt like risky at the time, personal decision. And also during that year, I'd moved away from Unbundled. Because the law firm didn't really support that. And we had our own sort of client development model. But I left and I said, I don't want to be doing this. This is not where I want to be at this point in my life and my career. And I think I reached back out to Thomas and then sort of coordinated with you a little bit. And then really over the next 6 years from there, I very quickly became a true solo practicing attorney. We'll talk a little bit more, I presume, about kind of what that's looked like. But really over the last 6 years, it's been me. 95% of my cases and clients come through Unbundled. And that's been true almost from day one, from 2017 through today. And we'll talk again in more detail about sort of all the opportunities that that's given me as far as my personal life, professional life, and all that. But that's kind of been the broad overview.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we can, I guess, fast forward to now you can in the solo practice and, move from the firm. And also I think the final, punchline of that story is there was a double, and I don't know where we're at now, but it's probably a quad on that final run, hey?
Yeah. So that is the punchline of the story, so to speak, is, what the law firm offered me to join them was double what I was making before. What I'm now making as a solo practitioner on my own completely, and we'll talk again about what the structure looks like, but I'm making more than double what the law firm offered me 6 years ago to join them. And so financially, it's been even more rewarding than I would have expected.
Yeah. And so, over the years, we've explored, once you kind of came on as, with your own account on the Clay Wilkinson empire, we've explored a lot of different possibilities in terms of scaling things up and kind of done more leads. We've done kind of middle amount of leads and so forth. And we've talked about, we can hire attorneys, how do you see this evolving? And I think you've explored it a little bit, at a certain points where you hired a couple attorneys to do dentin or certain areas. But then ultimately you've kind of settled in to not go down that path. And maybe you can just talk about what that experience was like for you. And then ultimately how you settled in terms of the structure you have now.
Yeah, so I guess for, the big picture point for me, for all of you, is Unbundled can be whatever you want it to be. It can be, obviously, you've heard about, the incredible professional success that these guys have had. I offer a very different perspective on it. But at every point along the way, Dave and his team have been there to support me and what I decide I want to do that's personal for me, so long as, of course, I, adhere to the mission and the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do. And that's been fantastic. And so at every point along the way, I've been able to try on different hats, to explore different ideas. I've had an associate attorney or two along the way work for me. I've had an assistant or two along the way work for me. I've, had conversations and strategized about how can I scale up. And just at the end of the day, I just decided for various reasons, which I'm happy to get into, that it just wasn't, that path was not for me. I'm a little bit of a control freak, probably a lot of a control freak, but it's much more than that too. This for me is kind of, it sounds a little cliche, but lifestyle lawyering in a sense.
Yeah.
Is I'm able to make a good income, provide for my family and my kids in the way that I think I need to, and then also live a full and rich life outside of that. And I'm incredibly lucky to have that and to do it this way. But that's kind of, I guess, how that, or what that evolved into. So
what would you say is your core aim in terms of what when you were reflecting on some of those questions we talked about earlier, and also just in terms of how you thought about your practice?
Yeah. So, and again, I recognize that all of this is very personal, right? This is one approach among many. Hopefully, some or all of you take something out of this today, but this is a very personal approach I've developed over a number of years. It may apply to you, it may not. One of my main motivating reasons for wanting to go to law school, being a lawyer is a second career for me. I got a journalism degree from undergraduate school. I lived in Washington, D.C. When I was showing my forearm last night, it's because I've got a Washington, D.C. tattoo on my forearm with 11 cherry blossoms for the 11 years I lived there. But I got a journalism degree and worked in that field for maybe 6 or 7 years after law school. And a lot of what I did was very behind the scenes work, where I would ghostwrite for newsmakers and public officials and government officials. And I would write things that would be in the New York Times and Time Magazine and put people on the Today Show and do all sorts of things like that. But my name was never associated with it. And a lot of times the work that I was doing, I would get no credit for. And you can say, well, that's a little selfish, and who cares about the credit? But I believe I'm a smart person. I believe I was doing good work, and it was a little dispiriting to me sometimes to do the work that I was doing and then just have it handed off and watch somebody else get the credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a piece of it. And so then the transition to law, one piece of it was wanting to feel like I was contributing to something, that I was making a real difference in people's lives, that I was being trusted to be the expert in the room, being turned to for strategy and guidance and perspective and knowledge and skill set. So that was kind of one of the original seeds, is that desire within me to kind of have that professional, lifestyle or life, I guess. What it's then transitioned into is, of course, there's that. A large part of what I do and what anyone who handles our leads does is it's kind of like law school in a sense. You're presented a fact pattern and you issue spot. And you very quickly have to say, in your mind, being presented this jumbled mess from a layperson, what are the 1, 2, 3, 4 issues that I can spot? And then how can I very quickly package that back into a proposed set of actions or work or project or whatever? And then how can I sell them on I'm the person to handle that for them? And so there's certainly that expertise part of it that's very appealing to me. And I like having new people come every day with new problems to solve. It keeps me mentally engaged. Beyond that, when I say the lifestyle lawyering piece of it is, I truly work. You've seen the headline, I guess, 30 to 40 hours a week. And that's kind of it. I'm married to an incredible woman who has a very chaotic and hectic work schedule. She's a vice president of a major restaurant concept where restaurants will open at sometimes 8, 9, 10 in the morning and close at 2 in the morning. And they operate 7 days a week. And we travel frequently for her job. She can be working at 6 or 7 in the morning all the way through very late at night. And I have 2 stepkids. My stepdaughter's here and came with me to kind of be a part of this weekend. I have a stepson, and then my 2 other children, who I mentioned as well. And with me being able to structure my work that way is I'm able to go to every single of my kids' sporting events that I would ever want to, which are, I mean, all of them, but I'm able to go to all of them. I'm able to attend every conference or meeting that I want to. I'm able to be with my wife wherever I need to be, whenever I need to be. I can work remotely, and when we travel to Oklahoma for her work, I can always go there. Last night was the first night out of probably 700 plus nights in a row that we haven't spent the night together because she had to work and she's coming up tonight. And so that consistency of being able to be a family person, a husband, a father, a friend, a son, and to do all the things that go along with that at this point in my life for a whole variety of reasons, that's all very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm able to maintain my professional life, which is very important to me and who I am at my core and what that gives me and also what I can give back with it. But then beyond that, my life is so much more than just the nuts and bolts of who I am as a lawyer. And the way that I've structured this allows me to kind of live that life as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would also imagine that perhaps that experience working for that white shoe law firm and having the contextual understanding of like, oh, wow, this is what it feels like to not be tied to my family and so forth must have been clarifying for you to some degree, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, my life in some ways has been very easy. In other ways, it's been very difficult. With whatever experience it's been, there's always something I've tried to take from it. And so in that respect, that was the worst, in some ways, the worst professional year that I'd had. But having that firsthand experience, taught me that that's not what I want to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And instead of having to conceptualize it in this abstract way, having lived it, it's just a very real world example of what I didn't want to do. So it was helpful in that respect.
Great. Okay, so let's unpack to some degree what enables a lifestyle lawyer. That should be a new brand. Someone's getting that domain right now, lifestylelawyering.com. Hey. All right. Yeah, so maybe just talk a little bit about, those of you that have been part of the mastermind retreats, know Clay's focus on limited scope representation, everything he does. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about that amazing paralegal.
Yeah. So a couple things about it. I'll echo a lot of what's already been said. The two things that stuck out to me from what you guys shared before is the document drafting component to my practice is vital. That is a giant time suck. And unless you have someone that can do that efficiently and do it well and do it quickly, then at least in my experience, I've gotten bogged down with that. And so I'm incredibly lucky to have a person who's kind of like a Tom.
Clay's got a Tom.
I've got a Tom. Her name's Amanda.
Who's got it? Who doesn't have a Tom yet?
Her name's Amanda. But Amanda has been my lifeline to having a very efficiently run practice these many years. And I've known her for a number of years. She works remotely. I think the last time I saw her in person was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. She helps other lawyers, but she's developed a web portal where assignments get submitted to. You can choose a regular or a rush option, and it's just incredible. So that's critical component number one. There's the noon Saturday tornado siren, I guess. Testing. I hope.
We are in Nashville.
Right. And then the second piece is controlling the intake, right? What's worked for me, which I played with delegating a time or two along the way, but what I hear consistently at every retreat, what I know to be true for me is that handling that lead intake process, being the first connection that I make with every lead, is vital for a couple different reasons. The number of people that I talk to that say, "Oh my gosh, you're the lawyer," not the assistant, not the paralegal, not the receptionist, not the junior associate. You're the Clay Wilkinson, not in an egotistical way, but like you're the guy whose name is associated with this. Blows people away, and that gives instant credibility and reinforces the idea that I'm going to be your only touch point at every point along the way. I'm not going to talk to you today and pass you off to somebody else. I know plenty of people do. That works for you. That's perfectly fine. But for me, it works in that way. And then also, I have that unique skill set and ability to with 12 years of experience, unpack their problem over the phone. And in a 15 or 20-minute call, I can unpack it and then repackage it back into an attractive employment idea that much more often than not, they'll go along with. And then we take things from there. And so having control of that process from the get-go and then supplemented with a great document drafting person helps immensely.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit to the limited scope aspect of what you did here?
Yeah, so good point. So the big picture idea, again, on the way that I run my practice is it's about as efficient as I know how it can be. And what I always love, doing about coming to these retreats every year is even though I've been doing this for a long time, and even though I've probably handled literally over 10,000 leads at this point, there's always something new that I pick up on each year. And I've already heard a couple things about how to make it even more efficient. But it's almost on autopilot now, and we'll talk about maybe some of the systems and processes. But I used to do the traditional hourly rate retainer idea, which a lot of us do. A lot of us are taught to do kind of from law school forward. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I transitioned to flat fee only. Same idea, earned on, paid. I tweak and adjust things along the way. The employment agreement that I send out, I send it by DocuSign. I bold and underline the middle paragraph on the first page that speaks to that. I have a little initial block next to it so that as part of the DocuSign signing, the initial next to that idea, just to, again, tweak and minimize the pushback if it ever happens, which it rarely does, but just in the event. But even that idea of offering phase by phase, step by step, limited scope, flat fee removes all the administrative headache that goes with invoicing and tracking hours and retainer requests and refills. I mean, the billing component to my law practice is 5% of my total time. Mm-hmm. And 30 to 40 hours a week, what's 5%? It's not that much at all. I send an agreement, I send the website to be paid, I get paid, and then I move on to the next thing. And then there are some, again, everyone's different, every approach is a little bit different. I don't do a whole lot of long-term payment plans because for me as a true solo practitioner, I believe it exposes me to a little bit too much risk. There is some of that, but even the maintenance of that is not difficult either. And there's different, I think Clio offers kind of an automatic payment plan option, LawPay as well. So even with that, there's ways to make that work too.
Maybe just one final piece on the limited scope part is flat fee, determining what those fees would be, and then typical scope that you would go up to until given the environment you work in Dallas and some of the judges there.
Yeah, so a couple things. Texas, or at least the counties that I practice in North Texas, so Dallas County, Denton County, Collin County, primarily, are very friendly to the idea of withdrawing from a case, particularly if it's agreed. Often you don't need agreement, but it makes it easier if it's agreed. And so what I'll do at the outset when I hire somebody, whether it's a brand new case that's yet to be filed, whether it's I'm jumping into the middle of a case that exists, is I will almost invariably pitch them on what kind of the next best step, right? Whatever that may be. That could be their fiance has drafted or their fiance's attorney has drafted a prenuptial agreement. They want me to simply review it, make sure they're not being taken advantage of in some way. Oftentimes they are, and so they never then sign the prenup, which I think is, kind of a good thing ultimately in some respects. Someone's at the end of a case and they've got a divorce decree prepared by the other attorney. They want me simply to review that, charge them a flat fee to do that. A brand new divorce or custody case where they want representation through a temporary orders hearing, or they've got mediation coming up, they want representation through that. I just package everything that I would do within a flat fee that addresses whatever they need at that particular time. And one of the benefits for me of being truly solo is I can meet them much more often than not wherever they need to be, which builds a whole lot of client buy-in, right? Because how many times do you hear stories about potential clients will go to other lawyers and law firms and get quoted a one-size-fits-all retainer or fee, and then they're told, we need to serve discovery, we need to do this, we need to do that. And the next thing they know, they're like, well, all I needed was this. and I'm being told that I need these 10 other things. But if I'm able to meet them where they are and offer exactly and only what I think they need, and it's financially beneficial for me to do so, then it all just kind of works out. But that's what I do, is really, project by project, case by case, phase by phase. And then if I do that first phase or project or whatever well, 9 times out of 10, of course, they'll pay for the next phase and the next project and the next thing that needs to be done. It all kind of builds on itself. It's very, very rare. I mean, I can't think of the last time that somebody paid me for one thing and then the case was still going on and they said, no, I'm going to go in a different direction. And then the other piece, which we've spoken of over the years, is how do I protect myself in the sense where I get on a case, my name's associated with it in court, and they don't want to pay, to continue. That's where sometimes I'll build in and I'll say, look, I'll do this flat fee agreement to help you through this phase. But to protect myself a little bit in consideration of that, let's go ahead and sign the withdrawal documentation. I'll keep it on file. In the event that I need to proceed and submit it, I will. But it's just being a little bit forward thinking about the steps that you can take to protect yourself in that circumstance. So it all just kind of works together that way.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
Efficiencies enable the streamlined, your ability to have lifestyle because you have a great Tom, Amanda, and you've got a good intake process and you've got scheduling tools and things that make that possible. So let's just talk about efficiency and what makes, your business and the way in which you bring in clients, get them secured, hand off, back to client, represent, just move as smoothly as you can.
So a lot of it's experience. A lot of it's just doing this time and time and time again over many years and just being, quick at some of these things. But I guess I'll walk you through, let's say a lead comes in, what that generally looks like for me. And I guess I'll use the example of maybe a brand new divorce case that needs a temporary orders hearing within 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of filing the case. So the lead comes in, as I think all of us know, I can't remember the time frame, let's say roughly 3, 4, or 5 years ago, Unbundled integrated with Calendly so that automatically a couple things are happening. I don't think this is through Calendly, but the lead call can come in directly to your phone when they hit submit if they choose to.
It's direct connect.
Direct connect. And also they can be directed if they can't reach you or don't want to reach you at that moment to your Calendly landing page, where they can book however you structure it, but whether it's an hour-long consultation, a 15-minute phone call, however you structure your Calendly page, they can also be directed to that so that on their own time, on days and times that work for them that match up with you, they can schedule something.
Yeah.
And so what I do a couple different things when
it's amazing how underutilized that feature is. It's like, oh, I want control of my calendar. I don't want people booking on it every time. It's like, well, yeah, you do, because then you don't have to do the booking yourself.
Right.
So it's probably one of the most underutilized integrations we have.
Yeah. And I would say, 75% of the phone consultations that I do are self-directed from the potential client through the lead hitting submit on the Unbundled site. They then see my Calendly page come up. As a solo practitioner, it's very rare that I'm just sitting at my desk waiting for something to happen or the phone to ring. I'm usually busy doing other things. And so 75% roughly of the people that come to me go to the landing page, schedule the phone call, and then I call them at that time and we do that. So that's how most of it comes through. I supplement that with, I have a Google Voice number that's not associated with my personal cell phone number. The Google Voice number is set to do not disturb 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I never answer the phone because it never rings. My voicemail says I never review the voicemails. Text me if you'd like, email me, however you want to reach me. I kind of give some options there. But that's a time management thing, right? Because if my phone always rang, I'd have to answer it and deal with whoever it is and whatever they're trying to do. Text can be a little bit intrusive, but there's an ability to control when you respond on that. And then scheduling the phone calls, again, allows for a time management piece, right? But sometimes I'll text them if I see it come through and I'm sitting in court waiting for a hearing to start. I'm not doing anything. I might text them and check the initial check the box questions. Is it really in a county that I handle that I get leads for? Is it a type of case I can handle? If all that matches up, then I'll text them. If I can't call them right then the Calendly link where they can go right on their phone through that brief texting with me and book the time. Separately, if they don't respond by text or I'm not texting them, I'll email them directly the Calendly link with a little bit of information about it. But again, more often than not, they'll just go to it directly themselves. What I do with those is I offer, technically it's scheduled a 15-minute initial no-charge telephone consultation. If the call is going well, I'll bleed into 20 to 25 minutes sometimes, maybe a third of the time it'll go beyond, 20, 25 minutes. But I'm pretty strict with that. And because I've done thousands of them, I'm just able to get it all done within that amount of time. And I'm very strict on that time because I have to be efficient with my practice, right? And so what'll happen is when the call happens, and I'll see on my calendar, because it auto-populates to my Gmail calendar, my Google Calendar, is Joe Smith has a 15-minute phone call tomorrow at noon. And so I'll call Joe Smith. Most of the time they answer. And I don't know how detailed on this you want me to be, but I'll go through my 15 to 25-minute phone call with them. Don't charge them anything for it. Issue spot. Think in my mind, what do they need? What can I offer? Quote them a service or services, quote them a flat fee for it. And then depending on what they say, yes, let's go forward now. I send them the employment agreement by DocuSign within 5 minutes of hanging up. I send them separately I use Clio now for all my payment processing. But I send them the Clio link. I follow up by text and a phone call to make sure they got it. And then if they say, no, I'm not interested in doing this right now, I want to check some other options, get the money together, whatever, then I'll just send a more basic recap email. So they've got something in writing for me that pitches the fee, the service, has my signature line, something they can refer back to. And then I may make a point to follow up within the next day or two or three, kind of depending. But that's how that initial kind of basic intake happens. And then from there, let's again say it's a brand new divorce case through a temporary orders hearing. If they sign the agreement and pay the fee, then same day I'm sending the intake form out to them. My paralegal, Amanda, has generated a just sit at your computer, fill out the field version of it, get that back to me. I then submit it through her site to prepare the initial divorce petition. If it's a waiver divorce, do the waiver. Within a business day, she's gotten all that back to me. Within a business day, I file it all. I then schedule the court hearing, and then over the next couple of weeks, I carve out time to meet and talk with the client to prepare for the hearing, and then of course I go to court. The other thing, just to touch on this, that occurred to me as I've been talking is, for a lot of us, COVID changed a lot of things. For some of us, COVID changed everything. And in ways for me that I never would have imagined that have turned out to be very beneficial. I never thought for a moment that somebody would pay me any relatively significant amount of money without meeting me in person, without seeing a physical office space, without meeting with me for an hour, sizing me up, all of those things. Probably 80%, I have about 100 new clients a year come through. I manage about a 50 to 60 client caseload at a time. A lot of those, as we know, are pretty dormant. Something happened a month or two ago, nothing's happening for another month or two. A slice of those are active now, but on average, it's 50 to 60 active cases. 80% of those, I have no clue what they look like. I've never met them in person. I've not done anything beyond literally a 15 to 20 minute initial no-face phone call. Mm-hmm. And for me, it works. And sometimes I'll do Zoom, sometimes we'll meet by Zoom. But the majority of the time, and again, what works for you is you, but this just works for me, it just has worked, is the majority of the time, if I go to court for a temporary orders hearing, I'm meeting them in person for the first time. And that efficiency, again, layering on all these efficiencies allows me to structure this in the way that it works.
Right. Okay, cool. So that takes us through kind of the enrollment process, initial intake, drafting docs. Anything else that you do from that point forward in terms of client communications to restrain kind of back and forth or out of the blues or anything like that to make sure that you're kind of mitigating, like, those folks that tend to, those 20% of folks that try to take up 80% of your time. We all know those folks.
There's a couple different ways. So expectation setting for me has been a key component to any successful client relationship, whether it's here's what you're likely to get as an outcome in court to here's how I run my practice. Setting expectations and reinforcing expectations has been important along the way. It's a great phrase. 20% of the clients take up or want 80% of your time. It's the same idea in a sense as, well, I know you want to charge me X, but how about I pay you Y? Don't ever be, I don't want to tell people what to do. What I've learned for me works is to say, my fee is my fee. I'm not embarrassed about what I charge. My time is my time. I have other cases and clients that may require more time and attention than this particular thing at this particular time. I don't owe everything to everybody at all times. I also have a life outside of work. And if somebody's being too much or asking for too much, then I will politely and gently and respectfully tell them that. And they respect me for that. And that's also built on respect that starts from the very beginning. And again, what works for me is being their only touch point. So it's a relationship that develops along the way, and it's always based on respect and availability. And this is the other piece of it too, is that if somebody texts me, I text back same day. If somebody emails me, I email them back within 24 hours, usually same day. If I schedule a phone call, if I can, 90% of the time, I'm always exactly on time to make the phone call. Things happen sometimes, you adjust, of course. If there's a court hearing, I don't miss it. I'm prepared for it. And so I do all these little things along the way that build credibility for me, that makes them think, okay, I can trust this person. Mm-hmm. So that if a month or 2 or 6 months in, they're super stressed about something, they're letting emotions get the best of them, they want to talk and text and do all these things, I've built enough rapport and enough credibility at that point that I can say, time out, pause, breathe. It's not really an emergency right now. It may feel like it, but let's talk tomorrow or the next day when I've got a better window so I can help you with that. As opposed to not being available for a week at the outset, delaying and ignoring things at the outset. And then by the time it gets to that critical point, they're fed up, they're frustrated, nothing I can say or do would redirect them. But if I start with those little points along the way that reinforce and build credibility and rapport, then when it gets to that point, it's a really easy redirect because they know that it's been consistent up to that point in that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We can go a lot of directions with this, but in this case, I think I'd like to open up to quick Q&A straight away because I know so much about the way things have evolved and I've highlighted some of the key components, but there's more to this for you guys on the limited scope side, on the payments. By the way, I don't know if we've talked about this recently, but how do you do the payment arrangements? Do you typically take a deposit, full, half down, recurring, same kind of thing?
It's really case by case. I don't have a model that I follow traditionally. I will say more often than not, one of the benefits of being truly solo, and we didn't speak to what Amanda charges, but I'm also incredibly lucky in that respect. She charges $19 an hour, and a divorce decree can cost $19 for me to outsource to her. If it's relatively simple, sometimes $38. And I recognize that I'm incredibly lucky in that respect. So the point is that, with that, and also because I work from home, I was speaking about the COVID changing everything, kind of along the lines of, I used to pay $1,000 a month for an office space that I would meet people at. When COVID happened and nobody was meeting anybody in person anymore, I transitioned to $100 a month virtual office idea where I've got an office address, but they forward me mail. Mm-hmm. So I haven't been to that physical office address in 2 or 3 years, I don't think. Everything I do, again, is by phone or by Zoom. It's all very efficient, all very built in that way. And I can then operate, doing 90% of the work, just me alone. So because of that, I can offer relatively lower fees, even lower flat fees than maybe most other attorneys that I'm competing against. Mm-hmm. Because I don't have a lot of overhead at all. I mean, my overhead is lead cost plus,
$19.
plus $19 plus $100 a month in rent, quote unquote. And that's it, and court costs, of course, but that's kind of built into fees.
Calendly's $15 a month.
Right, exactly. So little things like that here or there, Clio, $75 a month, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
So part of my approach, I don't kind of have to spread things out as much as maybe others do, because I can offer much more competitive rates because I'm just paying for myself in essence. But from time to time, it'll be 50% down, pay the rest out over some agreed upon weeks or months time frame. But I really try to, one of the big approaches of my firm has been to try to customize, representate, to both be efficient and consistent in systems and processes, but also, again, meet them where they are so that I can customize as appropriate, meet their budget where they need to be, so long as it's kind of a minimum threshold. So
that has to do with the initial scope of the arrangement?
Correct.
That's where you tend to...
Exactly. That's a good way to think of it is, it's not like you've got to pay X amount down regardless of what you do. It's more, if all you need is this, let me just charge you for that. Whether it's $500, $750, $2,000, $5,000, whatever it is, I'll meet you where you are, and I can meet you lower than others. And that's kind of the accessibility aspect that I can offer in that respect.
Right. Now you also could call this lean lawyering, right, as well, which is, minimal office space. Like lean ship, meaning low expenses, ultra efficient, not a lot of overhead. That's, what we call like a lean ship. So let's open up for Q&As for Clay.
What percentage of no-shows do you get on your phone calls?
Here's how I currently have it. In general, it's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to, I think they can schedule the last call of the day at 5 p.m. into, kind of the 5 to 5:30 p.m. window. And they can book it 15 minutes at a time, and there's a buffer in between so that if somebody chooses 1 p.m., the next available slot's 2 p.m. So if I want to do work in between, or if the call really runs over, I've got time for it. So kind of every hour, whether the first call starts at 9 or 9:30, it's kind of every hour after that is available. I always block out noon to 1 for just kind of personal time or gym or lunch or whatever. And then depending on what I may be doing, if let's say my wife was working on a Saturday and my kids aren't with me, then I may go into Calendly and open up Saturday and do some calls on Saturday. And let's say she's off on a Tuesday and I don't have to be in court. I may go into Calendly and block that Tuesday and trade here or there. But the general structure of it is that it's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to about 5:30 p.m. In 15-minute increments with some buffer built in between. And that's one of the great things about Calendly is you can customize it to whatever you want. You could do calls from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. if you wanted, whatever you want to do.
Legit.
Oh, 2 weeks out. 2 weeks out. Now, it's very rare, of course, that someone's going to go onto my calendar and book something 2 weeks out. It happens every once in a while. But I just, and not for any good reason. That's probably half of what I do now. It started out as no good reason. I just picked it and then it worked and then I stuck with it. So 2 weeks is what I picked and that's just kind of what it's been. So.
And you can't constrain that to 72 hours. Some more attorneys will do that because, and especially in criminal, you really should be constraining your Calendly booking because if you wait more than 2 or 3 days, they've already hired somebody else for sure. So a little different. This is family law. So what percent of the time is client communications and what percent of it is doing the actual legal work? Thank you.
Well, and I'll answer that in a moment. To touch on one last piece about that is another component to that is the vast majority of people will book the next available time slot. So if I see a lead come in and I know kind of intuitively that my next available slot is the next day at 3 p.m., they'll grab that next slot.
Yep.
So.
On Calendly, if you want to be efficient, you have a team to do so. You can also call and confirm that appointment right away and talk to them right then if you want to, right? And they're sometimes available to, and that will reduce some of the no-shows that he was referring to. You can call that client right when it books in, confirm the appointment and say, we're also available to talk to you right now if you would like. If not, make sure there's a confirmation call the same day. That'll substantially reduce the no-shows. And also make sure you have Calendly configured. We have a team member here that configures them with the text message notifications, the email notifications, leading right up to it. If you're doing Zoom meetings, make sure the Zoom links are right in the text message notifications so they have them. So there's some optimizations on the Calendly front to reduce those no-shows.
Right. It's a good point because I configure it so I think 24 hours before they get a text and an email reminder, an hour before they get a text and an email reminder, and then when the call happens, they've been reminded twice, which again reduces the no-shows.
Yep.
To answer your question about client communication, it's a large component of what I do, largely by personal choice, I think, because I think having that consistent touch point and accessibility and availability limits and prevents a lot of the misunderstanding, frustration, blow-ups, accusations, all the kind of horror stories that we've heard from clients about, complaints about lawyers and law firms. So roughly 50% of my day is whether it's text, email, a scheduled phone call. That's probably a lot of what I do. There's a lot of phone time during the day that's all scheduled. Like no one ever calls me and I just pick up and talk. It's all scheduled. But that's probably roughly 50% of what I do is responding to emails or scheduling calls or potential client calls or texting people or things like that.
So when you have actual legal work to do, do you then say, well, okay, I know I need this many hours to draft those pleadings or whatever, and then you just block out that time on calendar?
So if you have a certain amount of hours to do legal work, that you block off that time on your calendar as well? Yeah, to kind of constrain people booking overtimes where you need to do the deep dive work. Yeah. No, you're asking him, right? Yeah. I'm just repeating the question.
Sometimes yes. And the way that I do it, and there's probably another way to do it, the way that I do it is because Calendly integrates with my Google Calendar, my Gmail calendar, is I'll put it like a busy designation on my phone, on my Google Calendar, let's say 9 to noon. So that if someone goes into Calendly an hour after I do that, they'll see no available times for that time slot, 9 to noon.
Yep.
And I can, and that's true if I put a court hearing there or mediation or whatever, or just mark it as busy. So sometimes, yes, proactively I will. I've also gotten very good at just multitasking. So I can finish a call and jump into something and then 45 minutes later get on another call and then kind of bounce back and forth. And with the sort of case, I handle all sorts of family law cases, but partly by design, I'm not handling the sort of in-depth, lengthy legal research kind of cases, or the complex property division kind of cases that require a whole bunch of computer work. I focus more on the story-based cases, conservatorship, custody, visitation, cases, relatively minimal asset and liability division and distribution cases, where there's infidelity or abuse or the sort of things that I can, identify in my mind, what's the story here? How do I talk about this to a judge, right? So if we're talking percentages, there's not a lot of my day that's spent simply sitting at my desk and doing work per se. Beyond client communication, client meetings, client crafting, ideas and stories and things like that, there's just not a whole lot of true sit, for an hour or 2 or 5 doing legal work, if that makes sense.
How do you time block the drafting and the layout of the story of all the different facts that have been outlined to you on that consultation after once you retain that client?
Every state's going to be a little bit different. Texas is a true notice pleading state in the sense that none of that details in a plea. A brand new custody petition will only have the basic stuff. It'll have mom, dad, kid's name, date of birth, and then your very general headline requests for conservatorship, visitation, child support, request for temporary work. That's it. So I don't need to know anything to file a petition other than what's on the intake form. And then I'm submitting the intake form to Amanda. That takes 30 seconds for me to do. And then within a day, she's spitting back the petition for me, which I then attach our standing orders and e-file it. That takes 5 minutes. And then what I'm doing, maybe more so to address your point, is, well, how do I then get in all the full information and pictures and documentation and narrative and everything? So if I go to court, then I'm prepared. Is part of that, either part of that initial hire or shortly thereafter, I'll say, we need to meet again. We need to meet longer. I need to start doing the work to prepare for the court hearing that's now 3 weeks away. let's find a time over the next week, or about an hour, hour and a half on Zoom or phone to meet. I walk through that whole expectation, what to expect at the court hearing, the things that I need. And then I give clients homework. And I say, by whatever date that in my mind I know works for me, send me the narrative of from this date to now, in as much detail as you can, everything you think I need to know. Give some instructions on texts and emails and pick school records and whatever I think may make sense. And I say, get all that. And I give myself enough lead time between that next long meeting and court so that if they get all that to me and it's 10% of what I need, then I've got time to redirect. If it's everything I need or more than I need, then I'm good. So yes, at some point I do block out that time for that work, but also I've learned how to direct clients in a direction where they're getting me. And this is what any client does anyway. You're not born with the knowledge of what their situation is. They have to teach you anyway, but just how to get them to kind of do some of the legwork without them even realizing they're really doing. But yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. Great. In the back, one. Not the bush. That would be you. Yeah. So we'll maybe break that up into two pieces. So how much importance do you place on the quality and look and brand of your website? And I'll add another piece of that, which would be like reviews online in your profile, and versus just getting the leads from Unbundled from a reputation standpoint.
I have a website that I built through Wix probably 6 years ago and haven't touched it since, simply because I thought that having a website that has a couple through pages makes me look a little bit more credible than having nothing out there. Somehow through that, in ways that if you ask me, how did I set all these things up? I don't remember, but I bought dfwfamilylawfirm.com. And so my email address is clay@dfwfamilylawfirm.com, which seems a little bit more credible than claywilkinson@aol.com or sbcnet.com. And we know a lot of solos that have that kind of regular, Hotmail or whatever. Little things here or there that I think give you a little bit of an air of credibility, but not much more than that. What I take very seriously, though, is my online reputation, because just the number of people that say, wow, your reviews are so good. There's a couple nutty ones, but that even, like research shows, even having a couple bad reviews helps because it looks authentic, right?
Yeah.
Google me whenever, and you'll see that 95% of my reviews are all 5-star. The ones that are 1-star, there's maybe 1 or 2 clients throughout the years who got frustrated by this or that and wrote a review on it. But I respond to everyone that I can, whether it's positive or negative, because that shows engagement, it shows ownership. And we're just in a day and age now where if you want to go to a restaurant, you look it up online and see the picture from the restaurant, you read the menu. Why are you not going to do it? Spending maybe $100 at a restaurant. If you're spending thousands of dollars for a lawyer and you don't know them because they don't know us when they come through this way, of course you're going to look online and see what's out there. And so I pay very close attention when reviews come in. I request them if I think the client's going to give a really good one. I'm always a little nervous, but when I request them, but I often do. And then when they come in, again, whether they're good or bad, if they're bad, I address in detail. While you can see online, I address in detail why it's not fair, correct, or whatever. Like sometimes I'll miss a 15-minute scheduled initial phone call. They'll give me a 1-star review. Like, okay, was that really necessary? But I'll respond to give the detail on it, right? Or if it's very good, I'll reinforce that. So, but web reputation, I think, is very important.
Yeah. Well, like reviews and reputation management.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how do you respond to bad reviews or any reviews without violating confidentiality?
So in 12 years of doing family law, I've never been grieved. There, but by the grace of God, why? What do I need to knock on? Now that I've said that, and then the 1-star reviews, 95% of those, again, are people that I never actually worked with, where it's easy to respond on the, sorry, I was in court longer than expected on an emergency order hearing, and I couldn't make the 15-minute phone call, and I tried to reschedule, but you were pissed at me about it. That's an easy response. The time or two where there's been, and I say that not to brag about the grievance and the lack of bad reviews, it's that by making these small but intentional efforts from the get-go and maintaining that along the way, again, it's that idea of building rapport and respect and camaraderie and all of that, which then prevents even if they got a bad result, I'm usually not getting the blowback for that. And then expectation setting and management along the way. If you get a bad ruling in court, you sit with them after for a little bit, you talk through it instead of grab your stuff and run off, little things like that. But the way that I've always viewed confidentiality to answer the question is if something happens in court, that's public record. That's not a secret that you've shared with me that I'm now divulging. And so one of my first and worst reviews ever was a set of grandparents, I think, that got a very bad result in a court hearing for a whole bunch of reasons. They wrote a long, detailed review. Don't trust this attorney. He's this, he's that. And I responded in detail because I don't want that allegation sitting out there about me when I know it's not fair or correct. And I responded in detail, but I limited it to information that's public record because that's not violating any confidentiality. If I said, oh, by the way, in our meeting secretly, you divulged that you whatever, therefore you're a nutcase or something, like that's not ethical, literally, but I don't do that.
Yep. Okay. You can take maybe one or two more, otherwise we're going to wrap. Aaron?
Just a quick question, I guess. This would apply probably to many of the practices that are out here. But when all of us are so involved in the intake process and the closing process for that lead, my concern right now, even though I'm not a solo, is just do the wheels stop turning if I want to go on like a 2-week vacation and not have to be involved? And maybe now that's not as big of a concern for you. But I know for me, I'm like, if I leave for 2 weeks, like here are all the things that no one else is really doing at the office. No one else is like closing that case. And so I'm trying to get people in that position to do it. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about like getting to the point where you could just be like, I could leave for a month and not worry about like a case not getting closed or something. A lead not getting closed is what I mean.
Yeah, well, so I do travel a fair amount, whether it's with my wife to work occasionally, kind of once or twice a month for a weekend here or there, or at least a couple days here or there. But then, as you know, I do travel internationally relatively frequently, for other places around the country, relatively frequently. We took my stepdaughter to Las Vegas for her 21st birthday in June, and I ran into Daniel and another teammate just randomly in the casino hotel. So I do travel a lot, and I've run into some Unbundled people throughout those travels along the way. But to answer the question, for me, that's just that's the cost of, in a sense, it's the cost of doing what I do, right? I'm not going to be able to respond to every lead or always be available for things. Just like if you worked in a more traditional setting for an employer and you had paid time off and you took that, there's no expectation, or there shouldn't be expectation that you're doing work while you're on vacation with your family or something, right? So not every lead I'm going to close, not everything I'm going to get to, but if I'm doing good work when I'm here and available, then hopefully I'm banking and saving and doing all those things so that I can afford to take the time off and shut things down temporarily if I need to. So, and really with any of this stuff, when I spoke last year at last year's conference, a number of people talked with me after, or when we all went back home, emailed me or followed up and said, hey, do you have 30 minutes or an hour just to kind of talk through whatever? And I'm always happy to do that, so feel free to reach out after this and we can set something up next week after, next month, whenever. Because a lot of this gets really granular and very detailed, and I'm happy to make that time if you'd like at some point.
Yep. And I'll just add, Aaron and everybody else, we do also have a vacation pause opportunity for anybody, anytime. It's a week, 2 weeks. The only thing is like, it's not to be used because like, oh, I'm handling so much volume, I just need a break. It's more so like, I want to go on a vacation. If it's I need a break because of the work, then that's usually a reflection of like, well, do you need a little bit less lead volume? Do we need to resource you in terms of attorneys, paralegal systems? That's more of a scaling conversation we want to have, or an account like shifting, conversation to make sure that we're getting you the right volume that's right for you. And sometimes a little bit too much is actually a useful constraint. It creates eustress, and that's a signal like, okay, it's time to grow. It's time to grow, time to go to the next level. And we can use that to, okay, let's get an attorney going, let's get a paralegal going, let's take it, let's slow it down a little bit for a little bit, but let's get back up. And so those are conversations to have, but, international trips. Mr. Wilkinson is not shy for those and takes full advantage. And so, pings us on the live chat, says, hey, I'm going to, where was one of the international ones?
Well, so we got engaged in northern Italy in the Dolomites, kind of the Italian Alps, and we're going back for a week in January. And I haven't made the request yet, but I will be making the request. And because I can't respond while I'm there, I mean, both from a time zone standpoint and otherwise, I don't want to be dealing with leads while I'm in Italy with my wife. So as long as it's within reason and within your policy, then I make the request well enough in advance. They honor it. They pause the leads, and it's an automated process. So now, before I go, I get the email that says your leads are paused, and then whatever time they start up again, I get the email that says they're back in effect now. It's really as easy as that.
So I guess I'll speak to. So what happens when you take a vacation pause? Either those leads will get assigned to the other lawyers that service your regions, or we shut down the campaigns. Stop generating, stop actively doing it. And, there's more to it than that. It's more complicated than that, but we resource those leads to other attorneys, and there's many in Dallas that would take over that volume very, very heavily. And then there's other lawyers that, or if you're in a region where you're one of a couple, everyone has the ability to volume restraint. So no one will get that. So they'll go on a waiting list. Sometimes the folks will go on a waiting list if we don't have someone of service. Which the waiting list could be a week, 2 weeks sometimes. And we re-opt them in if they, okay, we have an attorney available to assist you. Do you still need legal help? Do you want to hire an attorney? Boom, they'll come back in. So we just make sure that they're still needing help. But otherwise, we shut her down. All right. Thank you very much, Clay. Give him a hand.
For more information about how our exclusive Unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. You can watch each new episode of the podcast on the Unbundled Attorney YouTube channel, or if you prefer to listen, you can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And be sure to subscribe so you get each new episode as soon as it's available. And remember to leave us your review on iTunes. We read each and every one of them and really appreciate your support of the show. Once again, thanks for listening.